we can find ways in which we can help our attorneys accept payment in equity.
I'm here with Tech Times. I'm here with Rachel Braun and Yaacov from Rimon Law. Can you guys introduce yourselves and explain maybe what you do on a daily basis and what Rimon Law means for you, I guess?
Sure, Rachel, would you like to begin?
Sure. So my name is Rachel Braun, and I'm the CEO of Nova Law, which is the operational arm of Rimon Law, which is a global, really tech-enabled law firm that is operational across roughly 14 countries now, and was really founded by Yaacov and his partner Michael back in the early 2000s to really be the answer to what we were seeing in the marketplace, which was a need for a huge amount of innovation in the way that law firms are actually run, the way that they are able to service their clients, and in just a way that you can allow for the use of technology to really collaborate with law firms and lawyers around the world.
Awesome.
Thanks.
Thank you so much.
And I'm Yaacov Silberman, along with Michael Moradzadeh, one of the founding partners of Rimon from back in 2008. And just sort of for some broader context as well, back in 2019, we spun off the company into two separate companies, Rimon Law on the one side, which is engaged in the practice of law, and Nova Law, which is really the engine of Rimon and runs everything from marketing, finance, accounting, technology for the law firm. And the idea, of course, behind it is that, to allow lawyers to do what they do best, which is practice law, and have a sort of a more forward-thinking, technology-enabled approach to all the things that go in to support that. And was really, really pleased in the last year to partner with an investor and bring in Rachel Braun as the new CEO of the Nova Law back office. And yeah, really excited to be here.
That's awesome. Oh, and I did my research. It was kind of confusing because it said Rachel was under Rimon, but also Nova Law. So I wasn't sure if Nova Law even still exists, to be honest with you. The website was a little confusing. So I was a little confused. My apologies on that.
Yeah, no worries at all. Yeah, the forward-facing organization is very much that deals with clients as Rimon, but in terms of the meat and potatoes and what runs it all behind the scenes, it's all basically housed in a company called Nova Law. But it has,
that's awesome,
for the time being, less of a forward-facing image. Yeah.
Awesome. Now, Yaacov, can you detail, I guess, the past, right? Can you underscore how Rimon Law specifically came to be, and then what led to the kind of spin-off?
Yeah, so I mean, back in 2007, 2008, I was working at a firm called Ropes and Gray. It's a really wonderful firm, really collegial, but of course, very traditional, very office-based, very hierarchical. And there's a couple of things I think that kind of came together around that time to lead to our founding of Rimon. So I was Michael Moradzadeh, our former CEO and still founding partner, was also there at Ropes and Gray with me. And on my end, I think in 2008, I was in a long distance relationship with a woman out in DC. I was living in San Francisco at the time, and I was basically disappearing all the time to go to DC and work from there. And no one really noticed, right? That was the interesting thing, right? So it was just it was just when sort of remote technology and Citrix and so forth was really coming into the fore, right? And I had, some anxiety about just disappearing from the San Francisco office and whether people would notice and whether my clients would notice and so forth, right? And by and large, just people did not realize that I was in DC or San Francisco or anywhere else for that matter, right? And so that kind of started clicking for me a little bit, hey, I really don't need to be sitting in that, fancy office in the Embarcadero, overlooking the San Francisco Bay for this to work, right? And this is still during the nascency of cloud technology. There wasn't really much out there, but you could sort of, hobble some things together with virtual PBXs I don't know that O365 was really out just yet, but certainly like Google Apps had just come to the fore, right? And so there's these little bits and pieces that were coming together that said to us that, hey, we can really attract talent anywhere in the country or the world for that matter, right? We do not need to be tethered to these traditional offices. And then also at the same time, I think that, going back to our old firm, which really was a wonderful place. But when you ask people what they thought of it, they would always say, this is a great place to work, ... for a law firm, right? And so there's always that that qualifier, right? And we were sort of wondering like, well, why is that, right? What is sort of special about this space? And there's just a lot of things, kind of endemic in the legal practice that people didn't really love in terms of, lack of autonomy and the hierarchy and just like mired in bureaucracy and technology that was always, at least call it like 10 years behind the times, right? Yeah. And so we wanted to just start someplace that was a good place to work, a great place to work, period, without any kind of qualifier. And that was really one of the things that some of the things that led to its founding back in 2008.
That's awesome. Wow. And then, and how long have you've worked at Rimon Law pretty much the whole time? You founded it.
That's right. So I was at first the chief operating officer for the company, eventually the general counsel too. And now with Rachel's leadership, we're bringing on some sort of new executive management. So we brought in a new general counsel, chief legal officer not too long ago, and a new chief operating officer that's going to be starting as well soon.
Wow. Now, how many... Oh, go ahead.
I'm going to toot Yaakov's horn here for a second because, talking about how, law firms are generally not considered the most exciting or, great places to work from like a work-life balance. Well, thanks to Yaacov and Michael, this past year, Fortune magazine actually recognized Rimon for being one of the top 10 places to work in the Bay Area, putting us right alongside startups and other kind of tech firms. And so, Yaacov has gone out and achieved a much better place to work than what he used to see back in the day when he was a young lawyer.
Well, I feel like the location definitely helps too, right? Attract specific clients that might kind of lean towards that tech angle, but also, I mean, I know you guys practice beyond just technology stuff, but give me some cool stuff that you've done in tech, if you can, like specifically types of, I don't know, cases that you've had, if you can, I don't know.
Yeah, so you have to be careful about sort of giving specifics, of course.
I understand.
Some serious, confidentiality, right? But in terms of, so some of the, bread and butter, it is true that our firm is much broader than just technology, although, it permeates everything. But some of our, biggest bread and butter, of course, is going to be in the intellectual property sphere. So both on the patent prosecution, really driving forward, and helping companies monetize brand new technologies in, biotechnology, genetics, crypto technology, cryptocurrency, and so forth, right? And then also, of course, apart from the intellectual property, we have a designated, let's say, cryptocurrency group as well, which is doing a lot of interesting things. And it sort of comes in waves and ebbs and flows a little bit, right? So, tokenization, of course, was a really big thing for a long time. And we were heavily involved in that while also trying to keep our clients out of trouble with the SEC. And then now also, I don't know if Rachel, you can speak to this too, right? There's like entire projects that are just based on sort of crypto technology, like whole cities internationally that are being built and funded exclusively from crypto, meaning that sort of the currency of the city is crypto. All of the projects,
the Central Bank of Africa, I think, right? Central Bank of, excuse me, I'm sorry. I know Africa is now one that's taken up Bitcoin, right? As their
I thought it was no, it was a South American country, I think
that too. But this was pretty recently. Africa was pretty recently. The Central Bank of Africa took up in God, I can't. It's somewhere in Africa, but yes, El Salvador is another place that took up their tenure as
interesting
Bitcoin, for sure.
So this is a kind of another interesting project where the entire sort of, it's a brand new city that is it's in the Middle East, right? That is being created and on the foundation of crypto, meaning that they're trying to sort of avoid currency entirely, both from the development of the project all through sort of the economy that will result from this creation, right? So it's this large multi-billion-dollar project that we're advising on that just has never been done before anywhere in the world, right? And so we are fortunate enough to have a large cadre of attorneys in our firm who are just really fluent in that stuff, right? But also obviously really careful in trying to keep our clients out of hot water, because there's, in that world, it's kind of like the other one that's very similar is like the cannabis sphere, right? There's a lot of like interesting innovation that's going on in that area. A lot of very sophisticated, players with high integrity, and also just a lot of characters to be avoided, right? And a lot of sort of pitfalls. So we sort of straddle that line a little bit, trying to make sure that we're not just saying no to people, which is what lawyers are often known for, but we're trying to find solutions that drive these projects forward without landing our clients in hot water.
Interesting. And how do you navigate, regulation on a global scale, especially in the crypto space?
Yeah. So, I mean, the nice thing about our, so the United States is a particularly fraught, Benina sits in Europe, a particularly fraught environment for that, right? And there's a lot of other countries where they just don't have the level of regulation that exists in those other places, right? So you don't, or at least the amount of scrutiny that you get from like the SEC and so forth. So, we have offices around the world. And so we have a lot of like local domain expertise in many countries, I should say, where our clients are operating, right? And then we also built out a little while ago a project called Rimon Alliance, which is sort of a best friends network of firms across the globe that work together so that we can expand our expertise into areas where we do not have a physical presence, right? Or awesome. in practice areas where we don't have a strong bench, right? So, between our firm's capabilities, growing capabilities around the world, and the Rimon Alliance, we usually have our clients covered.
How many partnered individuals do you have right now, just on the team in general?
Yeah. Do you know the current count? I think we're at like 190. Is that right? In terms of attorneys? Yeah.
Yeah. Yep.
That's awesome.
And that's just on the associate side. Of course, there's on the support side, there's another large number of people too, but that's just the partners, or the attorneys rather.
And then where's your biggest, I don't know, United States? Is it Europe? Where's your biggest, playing field, I should say?
It's still US. We're very US centric still. Yeah.
Gotcha.
So the vast majority are still in the United States.
Of course. Yeah. And then, going back to Nova Law, how specifically do you leverage technology? Or what sort of, like, for instance, blockchain? Do you leverage blockchain at all, or any other forms of, I guess, newfound technologies?
Yeah. So, it's one of those things in which one of the things that I think, we've always seen Rimon do really well is, they're working with these really innovative clients all the time that are coming out with very cool technologies, and they're advising, these clients on blockchain strategy. And so, what Nova Law has tried to do is assist in saying, okay, if there's a client that has a very interesting need to, pay in crypto, we can sit and work with them to find a way to accept crypto, for these one-off projects. If it's something where they're a startup that's moving into the, Web 3.0 space, and, they want to pay in terms of equity, we can find ways in which we can, help, our attorneys accept payment in equity. And so I think it's one of those things in which, when you're talking about such innovative technologies coming out, you need to also be working with a law firm that is able to, really also be working in that equally innovative space. And I view the role of Nova Law as that kind of support function and as that operational function to be constantly, working with our, counterparts at Rimon to find ways in which we can innovate to better serve those clients. And so whether that's, coming up with new legal tech, or finding new ways to accept payment, or just supporting a global organization, that is, both cloud-based and physically, located around the world. Those are the kind of things that are just really interesting operational challenges, especially, after the pandemic, where you saw droves and droves of attorneys saying, why do we need to keep going back into these offices all day? Why can't we collaborate from everywhere in the world? And so we spend a lot of time thinking about collaboration and tools that allow our attorneys to, better work together and put together these all-star teams, regardless of what country they're beeping in on.
That's awesome. Now, oh, go ahead. I'm sorry.
I was just going to say, there's this very, very like virtuous cycle that exists between our clients and us too, right? Because there are, and a lot of this stuff is really still in its nascency. I don't know, look, among us here, right? And I guess everyone who's watching, I can't really predict how long it will take for these things to hit the mainstream, or, and really become common use. But, we have a lot of clients who are also creating technology that is of theoretical great use to the legal industry and to our firm. And sometimes they come to us and say, hey, like, will you pilot this for us, or can sort of you be our guinea pigs, right? And usually we're really enthusiastic to do that if it's not going to sort of really destroy how we operate. So a couple of examples, sometimes it can be a little bit too much, or sometimes the technology isn't that good, right? But sometimes you have things like, there's this is also very, very nascent, but AI-driven contract drafting or brief drafting, right, is something that is not commonly used in the industry. But there are a few startups, some of who we've worked with very, very closely, who purport to be able to, you sort of give it a prompt or a question or an issue in a case. It will go out there, sort of do your legal research for you and put forward like a proposed draft of a brief that you could put to a court, right? I mean, we've seen just how far this has come if you follow like Google AI, right? You see how far that technology has come. It's still a little wonky, right? It still does some really, really weird things, right? But it's at least to a point right now where 5 years ago I would say that you couldn't really sort of imagine what that would really look like when it's finally a mature technology. Now, from what we've seen and what we've been piloting, you can sort of see a future where that becomes very, very mainstream, right? And then there's also some other things too, like smart contracts and using the blockchain for licensing of like musical royalties. These are all areas that sort of our clients are working on. And because we're engaged in the music industry, we're engaged in the crypto industry, we're same thing with real estate deeds built on the blockchain, that kind of thing. Like we have a real estate practice. So often our clients who are working on these technologies will come say, hey, can you toy around with this stuff a little bit and give us your feedback, right? And we're always happy to do that. And it's usually really interesting. I would say none of that has really reached the point where we're saying, hey, we can adopt this in our practice 100% and sort of roll it out as part of our product, right? But certainly, we're in it enough that we can see a future in the not too distant future where this stuff becomes pretty embedded in our day-to-day practice.
That's quite scary, right? I mean, artificial intelligence, it scares me a little bit, just a tiny bit.
Just how good it is, you mean? What do you mean by that?
Or just, yeah. I mean, I watch too much Westworld. That's what it is. Now, but you mentioned working with remote, clients and stuff like that. Now, do you see like the traditional court system ever changing to a point where like we have, our traditional court in the metaverse or something?
I mean, there's a lot already, right? First of all, there's a lot of law firms. I don't know that we have just yet, but there are law firms that have like purchased real estate in the metaverse and have established their flagpole, and preparing for that future, right? But I mean, over COVID, right? We went from and I'm not a litigator myself, so I don't know like exact stats, but I would not be surprised if we went from majority of interaction, like hearings and just motions being held in person in court, to majority being telephonic or Zoom at this point. So in that respect, like, the litigators don't have to show up in court nearly as much as they did even 2.5 years ago. That's already been a seismic shift.
That's crazy. Now you mentioned, or I mentioned metaverse. Do you guys work with any metaverse companies at all? I know you guys, you gotta be careful, but
I'm just trying.
Yeah.
Okay, you do know.
Yeah. We are. We're helping a few companies that are moving into the metaverse with kind of their patent strategy, their intellectual property strategy. We have our data privacy attorneys also kind of leaning in on that, and some of our fintech attorneys leaning in on that. So you kind of get a little bit of everybody advising on these things.
And I will say also, I guess I just have to check to make sure because I have to look it up whether we're authorized to say or not. But we also represent Meta.
Oh, awesome. Oh, that's crazy. Oh, so my question would be, what does the law within the metaverse look like? What does regulation within the metaverse look like? Is that even a thing? Would that be possible?
So, I mean, you might have to sort of drill down on that question a little bit. So this is not an area that I'm really expert in, right? But yeah, I guess when you think of sort of like the metaverse as sort of a mirror of the real world, many of the same issues that exist in the real world will exist there, right? So we, of course, already see sort of like, real estate transactions occurring, right? Some of those are occurring in cash, some of those are occurring on the blockchain, right? And, you referenced, of course, it's impossible to imagine, or you of course there will be some sort of like dispute resolution mechanism within the metaverse as well, right? So there'll be, it's very, very easy for me to right now say like, okay, a lot of the things that we have in terms of disputes, in terms of real estate, in terms of deals, buying and selling companies within the metaverse, of course that will happen also there, like it does in the real world. Where I'm sort of, less imaginative, right, is all the ways in which it will be different, right? Because obviously it won't just become a mirror of the real world, right? There will be some things that are just distinct and new and never seen before. And I'm just not like the sort of the futurist minded that's going to be able to predict that. I don't know if you have any thoughts on that.
Well, I was going to actually say, Yaacov, you should talk a little bit about how the Russia-Ukrainian sanctions have also kind of impacted on crypto, governance and what's happening there. I mean, we're seeing cases related to, the use of crypto, people trying to bypass sanctions laws.
Yep. Oh yeah.
Yeah, and I guess that's true, right? Too. So when that sort of ties into, I guess, the metaverse, right? Where I guess there'll inevitably, you're right, be people who try to do things there that you can't do in the real world, right? Because the law always lags. I mean, look at it. The United States, for example, still doesn't have like a national privacy law, which is crazy, right?
Yeah.
And in 2022, which is absolutely nuts, right? So you're right, Rachel, that like there's going to be there might be a sort of element of like wild westiness, right? Speaking of Westworld, right? In the metaverse, because like, can you imagine like our current Senate right now, like catching up on what that actually is and legislating around it to the point where they actually have some sort of control over there? It'll be, 20 years down the line at least, right? So yeah, it's very easy to imagine.
They're actively trying, but it's we're still far too early in the stages. I mean, look at all these bankruptcies now. Look at all the crypto, companies that are pretty much failing. It's kind of scary too with how some people have just dove into this new world, not really knowing or understanding where it's going to lead. Speaking of that, I know you guys work with bankruptcies. Have you guys worked with any crypto bankruptcies of late?
No, I mean we have worked with some crypto startups that just in the recent environment just didn't make it, right? Like too much of their assets were held in that. Yeah, so that has happened for sure. To my knowledge, I don't think that we've been involved with any sort of major cryptocurrency company going bankrupt.
Awesome. Now, what do you guys think of like the crypto space right now with everything that's going on?
I don't know if I want to wade into that conversation. Honestly, it's almost like politics, right? I mean, I don't know if you want to grab that, Rachel, but for me, right? Like, so within our firm, of course, it's not like it's not a monolith, right? You have people who are all in and still believe that it's 100% the future and can't imagine a world where sort of, our currencies and exchanges and businesses and licensing is not all built on the blockchain, right? And you have people, of course, who just think that like, this is the biggest scam ever sort of, hoisted upon humanity, right? And are just sort of like sitting back waiting for this house of cards just to fall down, right? So, I'll sort of, if I can, avoid giving my own opinions on the matter, but certainly within our firm, there's a wide range of opinions on the subject.
Awesome.
Yeah, and it's very entertaining to kind of listen and overhear a lot of those conversations between all these attorneys who are working in very, very bleeding edge, regulatory issues, kind of discuss amongst each other kind of what they think the future is going to hold. So, definitely diversity of opinions, as Yaacov alluded to.
But I think that's good too, right?
That's how it should be.
It is, and also it leads to good results too, right? Because you sort of have the people who are always like their foot are on the gas, right? And they just want to push things forward. And you need that person with their foot on the brake too, to say, whoa, this might be a security. This might actually be, contrary to this or that regulation, or I think this is just going to end badly on a commercial reason. And to have that dialogue within the same firm, and it really does happen maybe more pronounced in the crypto space than any other space in our firm, right? I think it's important. You don't want everyone sort of all just having groupthink and thinking the same way. It leads to bad results,
I mean, you brought it up earlier. Rachel said it, how people, even now, most people I feel like are using crypto, in kind of bad, ways of getting around regulation or whatever it may be, the mob, like changing their money, right? It's like, crypto can be easily, leverage for nefarious purposes, but I feel
I
like
mean,
they do
certainly
have
we
an underlying
didn't,
good.
it created ransomware, right? We wouldn't have had
Yeah.
ransomware without crypto, right? And that's something
Yeah.
that, I'm sure Tech Times feels it all the time. Rimon feels it all, we're constantly being attacked by evildoers, right? Just like every other company in the world, right? And so
Yeah.
that, of course, was enabled, right? But it's like many things, right? It's not all good, not all bad. There's good uses and bad uses for it all.
And where do you guys see yourself in the next 5 years?
Yeah, with respect to in general or just a broad question?
Yeah, in general. We'll say in general. Yeah.
All right. Yeah, Rachel, this is a forward-leaning question. If you want to just
Right.
Yeah. I mean, look, I think it's one of those things in which, this model that Ramon really pioneered, kind of by putting their operations into a separate entity that's focused entirely on, efficiency and entirely on enabling, the attorneys at Ramon to really just focus on what they do best, which is the practice of law, and really finding ways in which you are supporting people's practices, no matter if they're working from a skyscraper or a beach or anywhere in between. I think that we're really seeing more and more attorneys embrace this idea that kind of what Yaacov was talking about earlier. You don't really need to be confined to the traditional law firm model. You don't need to be necessarily working in these very hierarchical, bureaucratic law firms that have these really fancy leases and expensive office space. People actually value a lot more autonomy. People value having control over their own practices. People have a lot more of a desire, I think, especially since the pandemic, to really guard that work-life balance that they were able to establish there. And I think we're seeing more and more attorneys in particular who kind of grew up in this, law firm culture where, you kind of felt like you had to always burn the midnight oil and you always had to kind of sacrifice having a work-life balance and a life if you were going to get ahead. And what we're seeing is more and more people are kind of, rejecting that kind of false dichotomy of, oh, I either have to, subscribe to this old school way of practicing law in order to really get ahead and further my career with, hey, actually, there are, industry 4.0 is here. Like there's new ways of working. There's new ways of finding, the best way to serve your clients and collaborate with other attorneys. And I think what's fun for us and what's really interesting for us is constantly asking the question, like, how do we remain cutting edge? How do we continue to innovate in ways that are going to allow our attorneys to grow, to continually find ways to better serve their clients, to continue to find ways to expand to countries where we're seeing a lot of cross-border work. I think having that global reach and an increasingly, internationalized space has been incredibly helpful, because even though the US is very much kind of, our powerhouse offices and where we have a huge center of gravity, there's a ton of work that we're seeing, increasingly cross-border. And so I think it's one of those things in which for us, we're constantly thinking of ways in which we can be either incorporating new tech or finding a better way of doing something. And what's so cool, and I think this is something that really just speaks to the culture that Michael and Yaacov founded, is I think in the legal industry, which can be a very conservative, slow to embrace change kind of industry, there's a lot of a mentality, which is, well, this is just the way we've always done it. And the thing that I think is so fascinating about the Rimon Nova Law model is the question is actually, okay, what can we be doing better? And what's new and what's out there? And how can we continue to, change with the times to meet these client needs? So I really just see us continuing to really grow in a very smart and strategic way to meet the needs of our clients, and also continuing to make Rimon, a lot of Nova Law, we focus on, how do we just make Rimon a great home for attorneys that, just really care about serving their clients and, working with great people and want to leave a lot of the bureaucracy and bullshit behind.
I love that. Throughout your career, throughout your building of this new look at law, have you ever had any pushback from any form of I don't know? Have you had any pushback from people like, this is the way you're supposed to do it?
Yeah. I mean, I think you have people. Well, look, on the recruiting side, right? So we obviously are really very much focused on bringing in, great clients and great lawyers into our firm, right? And there are going to be some traditionalists for whom this is just not a good model, right? They'll look at us and they'll say, well, this looks too different, right? I don't know how that would possibly work, right? So, but by self-selection here a little bit, the people in our firm tend to be a little bit more forward-thinking, tend to be a little bit more entrepreneurial, tend to be, more okay with doing something different, taking risks, right? And so that's kind of the type of person that we end up attracting, right? But within that group of people, right, you still do when we're less so with clients now, I think, because industry is sort of moves fast and the legal industry has always moved a little bit slower. But when we're talking to partners at traditional law firms and you sort of describe how we work, right, and how we're sort of binded by this technology, that sometimes they'll ask, like, well, how does that work? Or I don't know how that would possibly work in my practice. I use so much paper in my practice, or I still come to the office every single day, or whatever it is, right? And so we know we make the case. And at this point also, we have so many examples of it working and working well, right? They were able to say, like, hey, you're worried about this working for a trust and estates practice or an M&A practice or a litigation practice, talk to these 15 people, right? They've done it before. And so, eventually they're like, okay, I'll give it a try, but I'm still a little circumspect, right? And then, they join us, and 6 months later, they're like, I can't believe I ever practiced any other way, right? We hear that all the time, right? Or, a very, very big example too is because our workforce, not just our attorneys are distributed, but of course all the staff at Novel are distributed too, right? And there's so many people who are like, I've always had my paralegal outside my door, right? How can I work without my paralegal outside my door? And we don't just say trust us. We're saying, like, well, again, here are all the examples of it having worked, right? And then people join us and they say, wow, I'm in New York, my paralegal's in Sacramento, and it works great. In fact, it works better than it used to, right? So, we have a lot of converts in our firm for sure, but certainly sort of in that recruiting process in particular, yeah, you do get the pushback. But at this point, we're just like so confident in our skin at this point. We know that it worked. We've done it so many times before that we just have the proof at this point, right?
That's awesome. Can you give me a good example of how you have I know you probably already have, but as someone who doesn't understand law, can you give me like a layman's understanding of how you streamlined law with your new, outlook, right?
Yeah. So, I mean, one of the very basics, like going back to the very beginning, right? The whole sort of idea that, this is changing now, right? But sort of the paradigm of law before was, you have very much a hierarchy, right? So you got like, the big wig partners on the top, and then sort of the more junior partners and the associates, and it's very, kind of militaristic in that respect, right? And we said, like, let's do away with that, right? So entirely, and we have a approach that is much flatter, much more team oriented, where just culturally, like, it would not be okay to sort of like talk down to someone because of rank or anything like that, right? Like, we're all working together on the same project. Everyone sort of, accorded the same respect, right? And people aren't, kind of tapping on everyone's shoulders or looking at everyone's shoulders, like asking them if they're doing a good job, right? Like, everyone is expected to be a professional, to know their job well, to do very well. And that's required also because we're in a distributed environment, right? There is no manager sort of looking over people's shoulders. So what we need to do is make sure that we have a culture and an environment and hire the right people who are sort of, conscientious and independent and can just do a good job, right? And so, by taking away the hierarchy, saying, hey, we're going to treat everyone equally here. We're going to treat everyone with the same respect. We're going to give you the same autonomy. Lawyers, how to practice law, how to price these things, how to serve your clients and craft your deals. We're going to let you do that, right? Without sort of all the bureaucracy and strictures and so forth. So that's a big deal, right? And is very, very different from how law has traditionally been practiced, right? And then also, on the Novola side, I was referencing before, that workforce is distributed too, right? So you might have, a billing person in Boise and a paralegal in Sacramento and a marketing person in New York, right? And they're not outside your door. You're all, collaborating over Teams or Zoom or what have you, right? And that also is that wasn't the way it used to be done, right? It's increasingly the way it's done, but certainly when we started, and even still now, that's still rather, revolutionary in the legal industry.
For sure.
Yeah. Well, look, I'll even say that, so much of what I also see as just a streamlined innovation is that in a lot of traditional law firms, you're kind of asking the attorneys themselves to, weigh in on the running and the operations and the management of the firm. And a lot of attorneys don't actually like that, because that takes them away from doing what's actually revenue generating for them, which is putting in billable hours. And then you have a lot of people who maybe haven't studied business or haven't necessarily ever needed to, run a company before, who, as they're becoming a better and better attorney, they're rewarded with, okay, now you have to go figure out how to run the firm itself. And so you kind of have this, weird thing where you have people kind of, in a traditional law firm, a lot of times you're taking away some of your best attorneys from continuing to just focus on the practice of law, versus, when Michael and Yaacov stood up Nova Law, hired a bunch of Harvard and Wharton MBAs who are obsessed with running companies and who love getting into the operational efficiencies and who love kind of leaning in on a lot more of the kind of day-to-day operations. And that's the only focus. So it's almost like you're allowing for everybody to kind of play to their competitive advantage in this model. Like, let the lawyers really go focus on practice of law, and let the business of the firm kind of just be run, by the people who are, focused entirely and wholly on that.
Yeah, you're right. There's right, Rachel. There's a lot of law firms that promote people out of jobs that they're good at and into jobs where they don't have competency, right? And I think that's probably true of like industry in general a lot, right? I mean, it may be worse at law firms than others, right? But it happens in companies at large, right? Where, someone's does really well at a job, so they get a promotion into a manager position, right? But, well, they're not good at managers. They were good at, whatever it was that they were doing before, right? But I think it's even more pronounced in the law, where, you have people who are really great lawyers, really understand how to serve their clients, don't know how to run a business, and frankly, don't want to, right? Yeah.
Awesome. That's about, I wanted to really ask, this is kind of a last question, but you guys have offices, right? You guys do have a physical office space.
Mm-hmm.
How often do you guys go to it?
So it's hybrid. So not all of our cities have offices, right? So some of them, do, and some of them don't, right? And in those cities, you have some people that go in daily, right? And if it's important to them in their practice, or who knows, they got, barking dogs, screaming kids at home, and they need a place to go, right? We offer that flexibility, right? And there's some people, even though they're 10 minutes away from a brick and mortar office, love working at home and can't ever see themselves going to an office, and we certainly don't make them, right? So it's across the board. Gotcha.
That's awesome. Now, I was just curious because you mentioned, how collaborative it is, and, using technology now. It's kind of crazy how we've turned most, I feel like, places now are very much hybrid. And it's interesting. It's interesting to me because, you don't really picture, attorneys really working on like Zoom. For me personally. It's kind of
in a suit and a desk or something.
Right?
Yeah, that's kind of the image, right? And what about you? To your point, I can't really tell. Are you at your home right now? I don't know if you can reveal, or in a tech Times office?
I'm at the office. Yeah, I'm at the office. I'm in the city right now. I'm in by FIDI, financial district.
Yeah.
And it's interesting, but it's not like I'm obligated to come in every day. I can work from home whenever I please. So it's nice.
Yeah, it is interesting. I've spoken to some CEOs recently of other companies, right? Some large companies, even like Fortune 100 companies and so forth, right? And some of those companies try to institute sort of a return to work mandate, and or at least temporary, and it just failed, right?
Really?
And I remember even asking, like, well, what do you mean? Like, you're the CEO. Can't you just sort of tell people? And he's like, I tried. But sort of the ship has really sailed on that. And at this point, they've moved away from mandates now to sort of suggestions, I suppose, right? Because it's just too hard to issue that mandate anymore.
Well, for me personally, there's way too many distractions and all. Like Westworld, so just I can't stop watching. But for me, it's like I work better in the office, and I just get my stuff done better here. Yeah. So it's I get it. Like, some people can work at home. It's just how they.
You hear both sides of that a lot, right? Again, sort of in terms of very polarized views, right? Yeah. People who say, like, I just don't understand. The fridge is right there, the TV's right there. Like, I could never get anything done, right? And for me, I think the balance is important too, because I used to find that, when I was going into the office more, there's important socializing that occurs there, and building relationships, which is obviously important. But in terms of like getting a project done, right? There's always people coming in, and you sort of can't get a workflow. And here, in the office at 8:30, put your head down. You can sort of really crank out stuff, and there's no one coming in to bug me here, right? And so it's I find it, for me personally, much more efficient here. And I've never watched Westworld, so I don't have that temptation yet. But maybe I'll get hooked after this call today.
Well, the fourth season just came out. That's why I'm all over it.
Do they drop the whole season, or do they drip one episode?
No. Yeah, it's every Sunday. Every Sunday, they release it. Yep.
I feel like somebody who's just completely out of tune with the world. Rachel, do you watch that show at all?
I do. I have not watched the new series though.
God, it's so good.
Is it good?
Yeah, unfortunately, a lot of people, stopped watching after, I guess, season 2 or 3. it's those weren't that great. So season 4 is like actually very good. So it's actually kind of nice. Yeah.
Well, I watched all the way up through the end of season 3. So I'll have to.
Okay. Nice.
Yeah.
Yep. Nice. Now, do you guys want to add anything else? Do you guys want to say anything before we go?
That's a very, very open question.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I don't know. So, I mean, tell me a little bit more about. I don't know if there's anything that your readers or your viewers want to hear about. I'm happy to talk about anything else that we haven't covered yet, though.
I'm out of questions, to be honest. So
I'll just say, I just think it's cool that, Tech Times is talking to a law firm, right? Because that's the sort of thing where, again, when you think about cutting edge innovation, a lot of people don't necessarily think about the legal industry. And I think that it's cool that you have something that's, so disruptive that really it's worthwhile kind of talking about where the future of law firms themselves are headed. So, I think that in itself is a kind of cool moment.
Thank you. Thanks for being here.
Are we allowed to get off this Zoom call without like some sort of interruption from a dog or child, though? I feel like that's no, right? I feel like it's not quite over until something like that has happened. But okay, I guess we'll take the success, right? We'll take the win.
Awesome.
Okay.
Oh, that's great.
And if you enjoyed this video you just watched, please hit like and subscribe. And be sure to stop by techtime.com for the latest in news about tech, science, business, and so much more.